And pure, crystal clear, oppressor strong and woven into every single article you read and song they let you hear. And then Elon heard that Jeff enhanced our fears by 86%, and he said, hold my beer. And not a single sheep among the herd would turn their head or say a word, cause they were all too busy begging for the shears, begging for the muzzle, happy just to guzzle, feed, and watch a screen for all their years. Man, to each his own, can't afford a home, but they'll let you have your cozy little ecosphere. Where there among your own devices you can break the seventh seal, overthrow the oracles and slay the seer. All the tomes were burned and all the lips were seared. Shut your eyes and all our lives just disappear. Now blink 'em twice. Welcome to your ecosphere.
Legend says that Hercules swept Cerberus right off his feet and effortlessly set him down softly as a songbird. Atlas kept the world upon his back and every day wondered whether he could stand it any longer. And Tara Reid came out to say the man they tried to label the messiah of morality was really just another rapist. And I don't intend to hesitate when asked who was the stronger. Tara, like Assange, knew that carrying the truth would be the hardest labor. Tara knew that her assailant wasn't gonna make us any safer, and knew he's just the type of man to hand a decent foreign leader US printed walking papers, and knew he'd be relentless and aggressive in the war he'd wage upon her very character, that his attempts to weaken and degrade and embarrass her would be her only compensation. But I strongly doubt that anyone could ever have foreseen the stream of hate that came from quote-unquote progressives and the self-styled titans of survivor advocation. So if you really think there's something to be gained out of sharing your pain with the world, you are sorely mistaken. The Biden team just dragged their feet addressing Tara's allegations. Until they had a decent list of smears, then they aired them out on every station. And it turns out no one wants to hear the truth of who they praised as being worthy of such bloated liberal celebration. That no one wants to really know the person they've so valiantly defended, even when it meant they had to gloat and shit all over someone braver than they'd be if given the occasion. Now cue the faceless comment squad invasion. Cue those fuckers crawling out the woodwork to come analyze the way you wore your hair and what you wear. Like your appearance waives your rights, or that somehow you're the reason for your situation. Somehow they've decided you should bear responsibility for what such monstrous men insist on doing. Somehow they're deluded by the empty, hypocritical, and useless fucking platitudes that bastard keeps on spewing. And I think it's very telling that the best of their excuses when they try to come and justify our president's abuses is a hearty butt Trump. In which case I'll remind you that you never saw the news attempt to sell us Donald Trump like he was morally upstanding or a decent human. But when Joe says something bigoted or ogles someone's little kid, CNN says, isn't this refreshing? Biden's like a mix of JFK and FDR with all the finer parts of Harry Truman. Christ, I know that they don't think that we're the brightest, but at least pretend we got a couple lumens. Ask yourself if you have ever questioned what they fed you, or do you just shut your eyes and then consume it? And now ask yourself if you ate every one of Biden's lies under guise of harm reduction and the promise of a slight improvement. And now imagine long ago that Biden chose to show you who he really was by traumatizing you for his amusement. Now imagine that you watched him touch a Bible with those filthy hands, and then assume the power of the highest seat in all the land, of knowing your attacker wields a global coalition born of 3-letter agencies who'll make a life's mission out of trying to discredit you through lies, damn lies, and collusion. Big tech is never gonna separate from our surveillance state. Fuck's sakes, they're just a breath away from total fusion. So there will come a time where even if you see the light, your voice will never reach the sky through all the bots and all the noise pollution. So trust us when we tell you that the masking of abuses is perhaps this country's oldest institution. And I know nothing nobler than facing it in honor of the truth when you know that the people holding power have been neutralizing truth since there was wet ink on the Constitution. So know that Tara's truth is something crucial to the movement. And if you see yourself a partner to the revolution, help this country see through all the baseless propaganda through the crux of Joe's illusions. And recognize that Tara Reid gave everything she had so she could tell us what the truth is. Recognize the decent thing to do when someone bares their soul and shows their bruises is not to ask for context or offer up your own solutions. Your job is just to listen with an honest mind and put yourself on Tara's side a moment so you understand the path she chooses. That there is no instant fame worth the dragging of your name. And if that's what you think, you've a lot to learn about the kind of facts the mob can handle and the kind that it refuses. You've a lot to learn about the news and all its many uses. Guess you've yet to learn the truth the news will serve as fruit from which they've squeezed out all the juices. And we all eat the husk and just pretend it's full of nutrients and isn't really useless. But the jaws of our ability to yield accountability are absolutely toothless. So don't you kid yourself that any lips are being loosened. They won't ever tell us where the bodies are or show us where the proof is. It's on you to recognize the lechery our president so regularly oozes. It's on you to muster up some honesty and ask yourself how Biden won your trust, but it's America that loses. Open up your eyes and learn to recognize the bruises. Open up your eyes and learn to recognize the bruises.
They'll gladly pay you by the hour for a minute or so, so you can sign off on the towers where they'll piss on your home. And if you feel like you're just powerless to answer them no, it's 'cause you are. They'll gladly pay you by the hour for a minute or so, so you can sign off on the towers where they'll piss on your home. And if you feel like you're just powerless to answer them no, it's 'cause you are. It's 'cause you are.
They'll gladly stagnate a living wage, snap the chains and bury it. Labor slaves in rusty cages dragged behind a chariot, led by Mr. Racial Jungle, Joseph or Iscariot, fighting over scraps as they barrage us all with variants and BuzzFeed clickbait, straight until we're paralyzed, trying to distract us from the concentration camps that Joe had swore he'd close but only chose to amplify, where they got 50-something kids in cages made for 5 to occupy. And no, she hasn't seen the camps, but Harris swears they're paradise. She tells us the facilities are safe, and that right down to the women, they are regularly sterilized.
Then she throws her head back and she proceeds to laugh, that sort of heartless cackle you'd expect from someone working steadfastly on behalf of the virus and a Congress full of parasites. And where was I? I was busy cashing every blue check, demonstrating plainly all the narratives expected from the verified. I was busy breeding verbal leeches by the terabyte. Train them to exsanguinate the wealthy while they sleep at night. Bleed the oil barons dry and barren. Say they showed us how to share and now we share alike. Tell them I contracted rabies from a feral mic. Now I'm just another species losing sleep to noise pollution and these glaring lights. Forced to change its habits and adapt to just survive. But now it's safe to say that some of us are thriving in the moment, throwing shit on presidential homes beneath the Paris skies. So if you feel like you're just powerless, I guess you bought the lie. But I can tell they're petrified of our collective might, 'cause I can hear those gentrifiers weeping at the sight of our collective rights. And I only can imagine the intensifying fear of knowing revolution's near. And all that's left to do is simply wallow in the thick anticipation of a rabid bite. And baby, one day you can ask your leaders just what that was like before you grab a slice. So if you think you're powerless, allow me now to change your mind. Honey, if you think you're powerless, allow me now to change your mind. See, they'll pay you hourly, tax them each apart, and build a shining tower out of loopholes and cards, and tell you that you're powerless to keep you in the dark because you aren't, because we aren't. You see, they'll pay you hourly, tax them each apart, and make you build a shining tower out of loopholes and cards, where they'll tell you that you're powerless to keep you in the dark because you aren't, because we aren't. Here I am, Lord of Flies, uphold law in a court of lies. It's sort of a divorce of kinds when you follow your truth upstream and you find that the source is dry. Force of habit. I was gonna spare no quarter and pour some light right on the subject and force your eyes. I was gonna hold your hand to the fire and gorge on the sight. A la carte as I serve no remorse on the side. It's fury or flight. So here I am, born with the hand on the sword of the former, and there is a storm on the rise. Tell those awake in the fourth estate that they're a little too late. I awaken to my surprise. There is rot in my heart, hate on my lips, and decay in my eyes. Best regards. Here I am, honey, Lord of Flies. Lord of Flies.
Who are these people?
Why?
Happy Wednesday, Al.
Why is that
What
the
happened?
case? Look at this.
What happened?
Look at that. Look at that. You can't even see stuff right.
I
Like-
told you.
Why
You
is
had
this
the
always the
idea.
case?
You had the thought. You had the.
You know what it was? You know what it was?
Knowing
what it
something
was?
was wrong. What was it?
It was literally I had myself in the wrong spot in Zoom. I literally like
Okay.
looked up to tell you. It's like I feel like something's wrong, like you know, and it's like oh, it's the thing I was looking at when I said that.
Right.
Anyway, welcome everyone to another episode of INN News. As always, I'm with my lovely co-host Collin. We're doing just the two of us today. You know, together if we try. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, we try. But we're fine.
Yeah, we're
We're
good.
good with two.
Yeah.
We don't always need a guest, though. That would be nice.
Yep.
But yeah, episode 30. And YouTube told us this, I think it was on Tuesday,
Yes.
that it's our 1 year anniversary of when Indy left, created this channel on YouTube, meaning that we're approaching the year anniversary of when we did our first live stream as INN, which is very exciting, but hard to believe it's almost been a year.
A whole
already.
year.
Yeah,
You think we would have gotten better in that time? We somehow still mess up, or it's just me. Collin does great. Collin does
I know.
everything he's supposed to. He doesn't mess up. He doesn't forget things. You know, like that's what I'm here.
I definitely forget, but yeah. So thank you guys for joining us tonight. We have our friend, companion, colleague, extra booyah in the chat.
Yay!
We have Randi. What's up?
Randi.
We have Rick.
That's Brandy.
Rick, a regular. Welcome. Thank you for
Oh,
being
Randy.
here. Gira, thank you for being here. Let's see. Well, people are trying in. See if anyone else.
She's a fine girl. What a good wife she would be.
Now, that's it for now. But
Brandy.
But
Sorry.
everybody, please like. I hate saying that because I just feel like, you know. But
Yeah, hit the
like,
bell, like,
share,
subscribe. Shameless plug.
We're trying to hit our goal of 1,000 so we can be monetized. Ideally, hopefully, we can do that by December. We have a community strike which forbids us to
Yeah, but that's over in
before that. But
December. It's our Christmas present. We get our community strike gone.
Right. And yeah, but once we're monetized, we're able to do, or at least start doing a lot more on the network. You know, but hopefully just the idea that we're able to produce more content mostly.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you guys for supporting us and helping us grow. And yeah, that'll be a nice Christmas present for us if we can hit 1,000 by Christmas. So
it would be fun.
But mental check, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. About as well as we can do when the apocalypses are coming. You know?
Sure.
Everyone's having a rough time. As an empath, that's rough. But, you know, we just keep trucking. That's all we can do. You know?
I just
wish I got like a cool trucker horn to go with the trucking, you know?
Right. Yeah. It just feels weird that in a couple of weeks it's Halloween.
Yes.
And basically it's like the holiday season. We're basically there now.
In terms of are you gonna do I mean, especially if I'm sure you're already hearing Christmas songs, you know?
No, I am very much a purist. I'm not sure if I said this to you, but I'm very much a purist in the idea of I do not want to hear a Christmas song until
like after Thanksgiving. Yeah.
Although anywhere else in the world, you could start playing that in November gradually. But I just feel like here with Thanksgiving in between Halloween and then the holidays, it just feels wrong. Like to me. You know, given that. But no, I'm very much like I don't want to hear a Christmas song till Black Friday. So but yeah.
You doing anything for Halloween? You gonna watch any scary movie or
Well, I don't have a TV yet. Well, not to say I need one, but no, that's a work day. That's a Monday this year, so that's a work day for me. I'll probably just end up here in my house see if I get any trick-or-treaters. This is my first year. Like, I live pretty much in the same neighborhood as I had before, but like in a different area. So I'm not sure. Actually, there are a couple of schools very close to me, so I'll imagine that that there'll be a few trick-or-treaters. So I might just hang out in the house
Nice.
and do some wait for trick-or-treaters. I'll probably may do something that weekend, like as the adults do, but we'll see. I haven't bought that far ahead yet, honestly.
I don't know what I'm gonna do.
That's next week. That's next week. Oh shit. That's next weekend.
We get the occasional like trick-or-treater, but like not really. You know? Like living out in the boondocks does have its perks with that, you know?
Right.
But I don't know. I'll buy a fucking giant bag of candy and, you know, overeat the shit out of it and, you know, like you do. But that'll be the day after. That's always the best part. Going the day after to the store and getting all the discount candies.
Or like for the adults in the room, like the day after, like whatever would be Halloween with all the big parties or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, like you sit out front your door and just watch the walks of shame walking back to their houses in their costumes.
Costumes are the best part.
Or not. You know, like depending on the night they had, you know. So I'll be looking forward to that next weekend. Although I've been a few times, I've been that walk of shame a couple of times.
No shame, just a walk.
No shame. No shame.
You're just doing it in a Spider-Man costume, you know?
Right. Well, not even just for me, like just more the idea of just getting really, really drunk.
I bet you go as like Blue Ninja. You just go as like generic Blue Ninja. No?
Me?
No, that's classic. That's classic Halloween costume, Blue Ninja. You know? Like did you see the group of Power Rangers that saved that lady from being attacked? Did you see that? It was like a news story that like these like servers at a restaurant who were like forced to dress up as like Power Rangers,
right,
like saved this lady. It was just a real funny story to me. But anyway, speaking of stories,
so we got our stories, our top stories of the week. And by the way, guys, like especially as we grow, Reef and I kind of pick these stories based on sometimes things that we're not seeing other content creators talking about, or stories that, you know, are being talked about, but try and bring a different angle to it. You know, we love the idea of having you guys suggest stories to us that we can cover. So definitely follow us on Get on Twitter and let us know.
At Get Any News on there. You can put hashtag INN News. Is capital INN lowercase news. If you ever want to leave stuff for us to like look at. But this week I brought I'm sure everyone is aware that we've been doing some nuclear exercises, right? NATO has, so we'll look at that and exactly how close they're getting to nuclear annihilation. An interesting story that Vanessa Beeley brought attention to on biological warfare that Israel took part in to rid itself of Palestinians. So that'll be interesting. I don't think many people have heard that. You brought some stuff, I think, right?
Yeah, so Indy brought this story to me. I actually knew about this for at least a couple of weeks. I kind of sat on it, and then he brought it up again. And our favorite AFT president, Randi Weingarten, headed to Ukraine. So we're gonna talk about that. And then we're gonna talk about Trump.
Yay.
Funny enough. Yay. We're gonna talk about Trump and how he's calling for peace. And the squad isn't, or any Democrat isn't, really. But as I said, I'm going to bring a different spin to this slightly. In terms of, I'm sure we know what AUC did. We're not going to go into that fully, but I do want to make the connection to what Trump is calling for, and and the Justice Democrats in general, and how, like, going to talk about ideology a little bit, in terms of what they should have stood, what they pledged to stand for and are not doing. And a certain
Gotcha.
person that we know very well, who I reference a lot, that I've turned Reef on, and hopefully I will turn all of you on to see what he has to say in terms of all of this. So
Gotcha. I think we start with what? AFT, right?
AFT, yeah.
Nice.
So we reported on Randi Weingarten, I believe, back in the summer, in terms of Chris Smalls, because during their AFT, American Federation of Teachers conference in Boston, Chris Smalls spoke at that event, and then a few other folks that we know of in politics were also featured at the event as well. So Miss Randi Weingarten actually went to Ukraine, and reported by Clara Weiss from World Socialist website. Randi Weingarten covers up the role of Ukrainian fascism in the Holocaust. What is that? So I probably have to watch my language, because I'm sure there's going to be some words in here that might get us dinged.
I think we'll be okay. It's imagery, I think, is the big problem.
Right. But all the same, I'm going to attempt to censor myself just in case anyway.
Sure.
So, but anyway, according to the article, nothing reveals the pro-capitalist and pro-imperialist character of the AFL-CIO as starkly as the deliberate cover-up of the historical crimes of Ukrainian fascism by Randi Weingarten on a pro-war tour to Ukraine this week. Well, actually, it was last week. In tweeting on her trip to Ukraine, Randi Weingarten claimed she was there on behalf of the 1.7 million teachers who are members of the American Federation of Teachers. This is a shameless lie. She toured Ukraine not as a representative of teachers, but as a loyal servant of the American state apparatus, of the military, and of the war profiteers who have raked in record profits from the multi-billion-dollar arms deliveries to Ukraine army and fascist paramilitaries. None.
Sorry, not
A little
quite.
too big.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can actually read that, so that's fine. But thank you. None of her discussions have anything to do with the interests of workers in Ukraine, let alone the United States. During her trip, Weingarten met with US-backed trade union officials who are now called upon to impose massive attacks on the Ukrainian working class by the Zelensky government. On Friday, she's speaking with representatives of the Polish teachers' unions in Warsaw, which are scrambling to contain growing working class anger amidst skyrocketing inflation. Her war tour in Ukraine culminated with a trip to Lviv, where Weingarten had the audacity to refer to the fascist massacre in the city to justify her support for the US-NATO war against Russia. On Thursday, she tweeted, "Spent time today walking through the Jewish quarter of Lviv and the memorial at the Jewish ghetto. 140,000 Jews were killed from 1941 to 1943. That equated to 98% of Jewish population, which was 30% of Lviv's then population." So here's the tweet that she tweeted out last week.
Whoop.
Yes. So to continue, you zoom out. What Weingarten failed to mention is that the fascist organization of Ukrainian nationalists under Stepan Bandera played a critical role in the extermination of the Jewish population of Lviv. This omission was not an accident. The day before, Weingarten met with Lviv's mayor, Andriy Sadoshi. I said that wrong, but Weingarten tweeted that 3 words guide him: unbroken, resilient, and survival. Sadovi is, in fact, an outspoken admirer of the fascist Bandera. So here's that other tweet.
Whoop.
So let's continue. In 2011, Sadovi praised Bandera and his fascist ally, Roman Shukevich, as our heroes who had defended our soil and should be honored by children and youth. On February 26, he urged residents to defend the city in what he called Bandera smoothies, to term for Molotov cocktails.
Because that's a brush. Okay, yes. Yep. Gotcha.
Okay. Right. Okay. Under Sadovi's administration, large parts of Liev had become transformed into something of a fascist theme park. The city is littered with monuments to Ukrainian fascists and collaborators, and numerous streets and buildings were named after them. In 2012, the Simon Winsfall Center criticized Sadovi directly for attempting to cover up very strong manifestations of anti-Semitism in Liev, and denouncing the city's administration for continuing to countenance anti-Semitism, including awarding a prize dedicated to Bandera. According to historian Per Anders Rudling, Krivka, I guess that's how you say it, perhaps the most popular local restaurant, is themed after the armed wing of the OUNB, the UBA, Ukrainian Insurgents Army. Its motto is, "The fight continues," and it claims to attract 1 million visitors per year. On the menu, they offer dishes such as cold boiled pork, handehoik, and combat serenade. Their guests are seated in dining rooms decorated with larger-than-life portraits on Bandera, while the toilets are plastered with Russian and Jewish anecdotes. This is just one restaurant in a series of fascist pop restaurants and pubs that are run by one of the city's most successful entrepreneurs. The National Liev Ivan Franko University, where Weingarten met with officials from the main Ukrainian teachers union, is, in the words of Rudling, explicitly committed to ethnizing its student body and to producing a nationally conscious elite. It is one of the most important hubs of Ukrainian academia, where the lines of what is deemed legitimate scholarship and ultra-nationalist propaganda are systematically blurred. Weingarten's promotion of these far-right politicians and institutions and her deliberate silence about the crimes of the Ukrainian fascists against the Jewish population of Liev and Ukraine have the most sinister implications. Because of its geostrategic and economic significance, German imperialism occupied and sought to subjugate Ukraine in both world wars, but it never did so without substantial collaboration from the nationalist bourgeoisie and local far-right forces. In World War II, this collaboration assumed monstrous proportions. The Ukrainian fascists of the OUN, which arose out of a violent nationalist reaction against the socialist October Revolution of 1917, became a central pillar of the war against the Soviet Union and especially the Holocaust. They were imbued with racist, fascist ideology in which anti-Jewish hatred was fused with the most violent anti-communism. Although Liev was then a multi-ethnic city of Poles, Jews, and Ukrainians, it emerged as a heartland of the Ukrainian far-right. It was here, on June 30th, 1941 at 8 p.m., that Yaroslav Sketsko from the OUNB proclaimed an independent Ukrainian state under the leadership of Stepan Bandera and pledged Ukrainians' cooperation with the National Socialist Great Germany, which under the leadership of Hitler is creating a new order in Europe and the world and is helping the Ukrainian nation liberate itself from Muscovite occupation. All over the city, the and OUNB put up yellow and blue, as well as, not going to say that, flags, along with posters with slogans such as "Long live Stepan Bandera, long live Adolf Hitler." As the OUNB was proclaiming its independent Ukrainian state, the most horrific, I guess that meant program, in Western Ukraine under Nazi occupation was on the way. Starting in the early morning of July 1st, 1941, members of the Ukrainian militia that had been set up by the OUNB began dragging Jews from their homes to prison yards, where they were forced to engage in rituals that were supposedly showed their responsibility for crimes by the Soviet Secret Service NKVD. Then they were brutally beaten to death. Jewish women were kicked, beaten, stripped naked, and raped. Pregnant women were kicked and hit in the stomach. The perpetrators of the program were above all Ukrainian nationalists, but also German occupation forces, as well as elements from the local Ukraine and, to a lesser extent, the Polish population. Historian Grzegorz Rosolinski-Lieb, who wrote the authoritative biography of Stepan Bandera, stressed that the program was a well-organized action in which the Ukrainian militia established by the OUMB collaborated closely with German formations. And then there's a quote there. The program resulted, pogrom, okay. The program resulted in an estimate 7,000 to 8,000 deaths. Less than 2 months later, from July 25th to 28th, the Ukrainian nationalists staged the next pogrom in Liev, killing another estimated 1,500 people. Historians put the overall number of those who murdered in anti-Jewish pogroms spearheaded by the OUB in the first months after the invasion in West Ukraine at 39,000. Horrific as these numbers are, they form but a relatively small part of the crimes of the Ukrainian fascist forces during World War II. Members of the OUMB were integrated en masse into the policy into the police under the German occupation authorities, which played a central role in the Holocaust in Ukraine. At least 1.6 million Ukrainian Jews were killed in this genocide. The crimes of Ukrainian fascism were not limited to the Jewish population. In 1943 to 1944, the OUMB and the UPA engaged in genocidal massacres of the Polish population that lived for centuries of what is now Ukrainian territory. Eastern Galicia, where Liev is located, along with Volhynia, again became the center of the OUN-UPA massacres. Between 70,000 and 100,000 Polish men, women, and children were murdered by the OUN-UPA, often with the same torturous methods that the Ukrainian fascists had learned from the and early deployed against their Jewish victims. Teachers might wonder why Weingarten is spending so much effort promoting a war that Biden himself has said could lead to Armageddon, under conditions in which teachers confront an ongoing pandemic and escalating austerity that is aimed at destroying the institution of public education. In reality, teachers in the US are the victims of the same pro-capitalist and war policies that Weingarten and the AFL-CIO are imposing on workers in Eastern Europe. Weingarten postures as a defender of Ukrainian freedom, while she and the AFT have played an indispensable role in enforcing the herd immunity response of the ruling class to the COVID-19 pandemic by pushing for the unsafe reopening of schools on behalf of Wall Street and against the opposition of teachers and parents. As a result of these murderous policies, more than 1 million Americans have died, among them at least 8,000 teachers and 2,000 children. To the American ruling class, the buildup of fascist forces not only in Ukraine, but also at home, is a necessary component of the drive of US imperialism to subject first Russia, then China, and eventually the entire globe to its unrestrained domination, and to prepare for violent confrontation with the working class. Within this strategy of war at both home and abroad, the union bureaucracies played a critical role of suppressing the class struggle and subordinating the working class to the state machinery and the interests of the ruling class. Randi Weingarten's visit to Liev and her cover-up of the crimes of Ukrainian fascism, makes two things abundantly clear. First, a movement to put an end to the war must involve a rebellion by workers in the US and across the world against these reactionary apparatuses, and the establishment of an international network of rank and file committees to organize workers' struggles in an internationally unified and coordinated manner. Second, a socialist anti-war movement in the working class must be prepared by and rooted in the defense of historical truth and the assimilation of all the key political lessons of the great unsolved issues of the 20th century. Thoughts, Reef? That was a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think it's stuff a lot of, like individually people might know those things. It's the fact that like Weingarten is going, which like, why is the AFT, which we've covered this before previously, right?
Yeah.
On, like what, and the AFT also focused on COVID stuff too, right? And I think green energy as well. Are you out? Okay. Bye, kitty. But like, and what did he even give an excuse of why he was over there? Like, have people asked him?
She.
Okay.
Well, the idea was, she was going in solidarity, quote unquote.
Gotcha.
Which is kind of bull considering, like, and again, this is the idea of like, and I see a lot of people have said this online. It's like, yeah, we should offer aid to Ukraine, all this. Fine. And I'm not going to get into that argument now, but if you're going to do that, like, take care of your own house, take care of the issues at home. Right now, teachers are not getting paid. Teachers are overworked, overworked. There are issues with COVID still in schools that have not been taken care of. And as a leader, I would imagine that her first priority should be towards the teachers here.
Yeah.
I don't, whether or not you can argue like whether or not she goes to Ukraine or not, but the idea that she's going in solidarity with and meeting with unions there, and they're having similar issues over the idea of staying at home and trying to take care of the issues that she like kind of fucked up, in terms of COVID. And then I mean, I'm not a fan of teachers unions I mean, I'm a part of one, but I'm not a fan of them because I feel like in many cases, they're like, they don't really have any power really, like ones in local districts. Like obviously the AAT is the biggest one and obviously has the biggest amount of power. She should be doing more to kind of combat the issues here. So the idea that she's going over there to try and work with the working class in Ukraine is just kind of like, and that was the comments I was seeing online in regards to this. It's just kind of like, you're going over there to help Ukrainian people, but you're not helping the people here.
Right.
And then like just the historical significance of where she went, which many people actually did not know of this until Indy sent me this article on Monday. The idea like where she went has a lot of far right undertones to it. It's just kind of tone deaf, so yeah, I think it's just her way of kind of being complicit to what our government is wanting to do in Ukraine, in the sense of, our way of beating Russia is to basically beat up Ukraine, essentially, and she's kind of complicit in that. So that's just my take on it.
Yep. I feel you. Yeah, it's weird. Like, I mean, it's standard politician. Me and Nitty talk about labor frequently, right?
Mm-hmm.
In a way that like they're very similar to politicians and politics in general, right? Like, in the way that union leaders work and how unions operate. There's lots of like nuanced problems, and a lot of times they choose, instead of dealing with problems because there's a lot to deal with, like they choose to go after, like identity politics stuff, or like this to me is equally as bad as like right wingers during the Bush administration with the war on terror, like imagine if your teachers union talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
Or like that they went over there to do, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. I think it's kind of fitting, like with the next segment that I report on, in talking about, ideology or whatever. Like, I think it's very fitting in terms of like what you say your principles are versus what your actions are. And so I think even in the article, like, and it does, I don't follow Randi Weingarten like that, but it's like, even if she went, and if you disagree on that, where are the calls for anti-war? Like, where are the calls for her on behalf of teachers to kind of say to teachers over there, look, we want this war to end, or at least have a ceasefire in terms of, helping the US, Ukraine, and Russia come to some sort of deal or agreement, It didn't sound like that happened, So that just kind of puts into question, like, why she was there, She wasn't necessarily, as far as, like, I assume, wasn't calling for anti-war. So, so I just feel she's just kind of being complicit in prolonging and making worse, this war issue, and, probably exacerbating it, in a lot of ways, just by being there. So again, like I said, whatever you feel about Ukraine, fine, but it's like, we have issues here that you haven't necessarily addressed, and as our top union leader, essentially, in the country for teachers, she has a position where she should be speaking out on this more. Like, I get emails from her all the time from work, but like, I don't read them because I don't buy what she talks about. She talks about how, teachers are like, like, we're necessary, and like, we're doing good work and all that kind of stuff. I don't feel that kind of care from her. Well, yeah, I mean, long story short, she's part of the establishment. So, so I don't expect her to really reach out on behalf of us. That's where, as the working class, and, being in solidarity, not just among people here, but in Ukraine too, because the working class in Ukraine are being, and I don't think really anyone's talking about them either. This war is affecting them, and their livelihood. And mainstream media is not talking about, what's happening to working class people there. This is where we need to work in solidarity, especially since, I'm sure many Ukrainians are anti-war too. So where's the calls for that from them that we don't hear about? So,
well, meanwhile, in the halls of injustice, like, this is speaking of anti-war, rehearsal for Armageddon underway as NATO and Russia hold nuclear exercises. All nuclear exercises imply willingness to mass murder civilians, wipe out entire cities, and risk all-out nuclear war, said ICANN. They also risk accidents and escalation and will legitimize Russia's dangerous nuclear rhetoric. I mean, why? Because ICANN, right? Like, that's partly. So this is Brett Wilkins from Common Dreams.
My favorite, one of our favorite.
Yep. He does good stuff. He tries to leave what people have, like, as their own words, usually. So as NATO on Monday began its annual rehearsal for nuclear war in Europe, and Russia prepared to conduct its own nuclear drill amid Cold War-like tensions inflamed by the invasion of Ukraine, peace advocates underscored the imperative for de-escalation in order to avert catastrophe. So this is from ICANN, right? If I can get this squared. Yep. All nuclear exercises imply willingness to mass murder civilians, wipe out entire cities, and risk all-out nuclear war. The international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons, otherwise known as ICANN, warned ahead of the NATO drill. They also risk accidents and escalation and will legitimize Russia's dangerous nuclear rhetoric. Which, what about our dangerous nuclear rhetoric? Which, I'm sure somebody will get into soon. NATO said the exercise operation, named Steadfast Noon, involves up to 60 warplanes from 14 members of the alliance and is being carried out from Klein Brogel Air Base in northeastern Belgium. So, the U.S. military stockpiles dozens of B-6112 tactical nuclear warheads at Klein Brogel, each up to 30 times as powerful as the atomic bomb that the United States dropped on Hiroshima, Japan in 1945, killing over 100,000 people. So, we're in, where's that Klein-Brogel base at, Colin? Do you remember? Belgium?
Yeah.
So how far away do you think Belgium is from Russia?
Pretty far.
Like, kind of, you know, I mean, it's like on the other
Far
side
enough.
of Germany, you know, like,
Well, yeah, I mean, Belgium is basically on the North Sea,
yeah,
but in the west, and Russia is basically on the other side of Europe. So
yeah,
quite a distance.
yeah.
between the
But
two.
for a plane, not that far.
No.
Like, so how many dozens, they say, tactical nuclear warheads an airplane distance away, you know, like, so, Peter Crenau, says, why, oh dear God, why is NATO holding an exercise for US B-52 bombers and F-16 fighters to simulate dropping atomic bombs over Europe when we need peace, not threats? US rehearses dropping nuclear bombs in Europe, which is like the article that he's quoting. And this is the article. According to Belgium's VRT News, Belgian F-16 pilots will train how to drop the bombs, while ground crews will practice transporting the weapons from underground bunkers and loading them on warplanes. U.S. B-52 bombers based at Minot Air Force Base in North Dakota will also fly to Europe to participate in the drill, which will take place over Belgium, the North Sea, and the United Kingdom, according to NATO. Russia has been informed of the exercise, which is scheduled to last until October 30th. While NATO spokesperson Ona Lungescu explained that Steadfast Noon helps ensure that the alliance's nuclear deterrent remains safe, secure, and effective. Ludo Debrabander of the Belgian peace group Vred VCW told VRT News that in a nuclear escalation, military bases equipped with nuclear weapons like Klein-Brogel form the first potential targets. They don't make us safer. So here's ICANN at a time when the world is outraged by Russia's unacceptable nuclear threats. NATO should not follow suit and practice using weapons of mass destruction. Another nuclear-related exercise was canceled in March, most likely to avoid the risk of escalation. So ICANN's asking them for them to cancel this, essentially. So they continue, we're closer to nuclear war than we have been since the Cuban Missile Crisis, and no one can afford further escalation. All governments must condemn all nuclear threats and cease military preparations which simulate the use of nuclear weapons. I definitely agree on that one. So earlier this month, U.S. President Joe Biden responded to repeated threats by Russian Vladimir Putin to use nuclear weapons in Ukraine by warning that even the use of tactical nukes was likely to end up with Armageddon. Most recently, Biden called Putin a rational actor who has miscalculated significantly by launching a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said during a press conference last week that Russia knows that a nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought. Russian forces are expected to carry out their own annual large-scale nuclear exercise called Grom, or Thunder, along Russia's northwestern coast in the coming days or weeks, its second of the year. So, and this is like their, like, plan, essentially, right? Which simulates going over the North Pole to us, I imagine.
Yeah, actually is the North Pole.
Yeah. So, which, like, I can't blame them if we're gonna practice. They might as well practice, I guess, right? So this is nuclear dick measuring at its finest.
Right.
Like, so white drills like Steadfast Noon and Grom don't involve live nuclear warheads. they do have the potential for catastrophic escalation. In November 1983, an extremely tense period of the Cold War, Soviet military officials initially mistook NATO's Able Archer 83 war game for a possible preemptive strike and prepared their own nuclear missiles for launch. It was a vicious circle, wrote Francine Unima for Smithsonian Magazine. The Soviets refused to believe the Americans were bluffing. The Americans, meanwhile, suspected the Soviets were bluffing about not thinking the Americans were bluffing. Where's my soundboard when I need it? We're fucked.
Basically, yeah.
Like, ugh.
That was another thing you get right.
I mean, Elon Musk.
Also, chat, let us know what sound clips we should add to the soundboard too.
Yeah.
That's us to the side.
We're fucked.
There we go.
But our old friend, Twitter owner hopeful Elon Musk, practice makes perfect is what he's replying. So nice. And this is Rollin reading that Able Archer 83 should be read by everyone who wants to weigh in on these exercises. So yeah, that's them talking about we almost caused nuclear war with a war game that I just read.
Yeah.
So Hans M. Christensen, a nuclear weapons expert with the Federation of American Scientists, warned that NATO and Russia holding nuclear exercises during what many call a proxy war between them is inherently perilous. It's a textbook example of what happens in a tense crisis where both sides escalate to demonstrate that they are serious about deterring each other, but therefore can't de-escalate because it would make them look weak. He wrote, ICANN tweeted Friday that we're closer to nuclear war than we have been since the Cuban Missile Crisis, and no one can afford further escalation. All governments must condemn all nuclear threats and cease military preparations which simulate the use of nuclear weapons. In a Common Dreams opinion piece marking the 60th anniversary of the Cuban Missile Crisis, during which the world came as close as it ever has to a major nuclear war, Robert Dodge of Physicians for Social Responsibility wrote that nuclear weapons remain the greatest real and present danger to our future. Every day that these weapons exist, our future and that of all subsequent generations is threatened, Dodge continued. We are here this moment not due to the strength of our militaries, nuclear weapons, or the genius of our leaders. We are here through the graces of sheer luck. Sooner or later, our luck will run out. It is time that Americans and citizens around the world take to the streets and voting booths demanding there be no nuclear response in Ukraine, a negotiated settlement now, and the abolition of all nuclear weapons, he added. Thoughts, Collin?
So in a nutshell, this is a big game of chicken at our expense.
Yep.
That's what this reminds me of. So, America is obviously fearing the worst and are preparing. Russia is also preparing for the worst and are preparing. And all the working class in the middle of this, as Missy will say, are fucked.
Ooh, we're fucked.
Yes, basically. So that's
yeah.
what I took out of this article is, I don't want people to think that I or we within the network are like Russian sympathizers. Like we hate Putin too. He's a capitalist too,
Yeah.
But but again, as I said in the last segment, where are the calls for peace? Where are the calls for anti-war?
Well, I mean, the calls for peace have been from Russia, and they were turned down.
Right.
Essentially.
Right. So it's like the fact that this reminds me of Ukraine all over again. Like the initial idea that we thought like we were in the right, to go over. after 9/11, and then ended up being like hoodwinked into, you know, the media and like the corporations basically indoctrinated to think to us that it was okay. And then we're dealing with the aftermath of that now. And like people online are basically, you know, saying this has to happen. And I'm like, why? Like, we didn't learn like as recently as 20 years ago regarding Ukraine. So
Well, and
it's just like,
it's
as you
just
said, who has
sad.
the biggest dick, you know, basically, and like show it off, and
Yeah,
like
this is
who has
Doctor
the biggest,
Strangelove. Like,
right?
that's
Like
it's.
who has the bigger nukes, who has the bigger tanks, who has the bigger guns, you know, like,
Yeah.
and
Who's willing to waste more resources?
right,
Yeah.
you know, and I mean, we know the answer to that, but
Yeah.
you know, but
They might find out that that's a losing strategy. Like,
right,
you know. So I just hope people keep their fucking little grubby fingers off the red button. Please fucking don't do that shit.
well, I can actually trust Putin more that he won't do anything compared to Biden will, honestly. Yeah. Like, because Trump is basically saying, like, we're going for it. Like, fuck that, we're going for it. You know, so like, you know, I feel like Putin is a little more sympathetic and being like, I don't want to do anything, but I will if you push me to.
Speaking of Donald Trump.
Speaking of Donald Trump, a person that I didn't think that we were going to talk about for at least another year, 6 months to a year, is the only one. No, he's not the only one. The only major person that I think people care about enough to call for peace. Now, do I think, or do we think that Trump actually means this? No.
Not entirely.
Not entirely, but like, you know, I'll break it down a little bit more in a few minutes. But, you know, according to written by Ajama Bakara from the Black Agenda Report, that was printed in popularresistance.org, Trump calls for peace in Ukraine while Democrats make support for war a midterm campaign issue. Trump is no peacemaker, but his stance on negotiations to end the war in Ukraine is in stark contrast to that of the Democrats, who fully support continuing the dangerous proxy war against Russia. Anti-war forces must step up and struggle for peace. I think just with these stories, I don't think we intentionally did it, but like, there's a common theme, you know, to all stories, at least with these three. So, do you mind moving your screen?
Yeah.
So I can see. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Oh, wait.
You're good. There you go.
All right. Since the U.S. sponsored coup in Ukraine in 2014, which no one talks about.
Yeah.
Like, because everyone's like, Russia invaded. No one asked why.
Right.
This is why they did. Taking a stand against the plan by the U.S. to use Ukraine as a weapon of war against Russia was a perilous stance for pro-peace and anti-imperialist forces. What made opposition especially difficult was that the plan was being executed by the administration of Nobel Peace Prize winner Barack Obama, with the full support of the right-wing neoliberal establishment that controlled and still controls the U.S. state. But while it was a challenge to oppose the many criminal adventures of the Obama administration, I can tell you it's having fun writing this. The turn of that administration to power under Joe Biden has ushered in the acceleration and normalization of censorship, the blatant politicization of the investigative agencies of the state, and the war fever that has gripped the culture. Opposition to neo-war agenda and domestic subversion has become an affront subject to perennial prosecution or minimum social
Where's it at? Ostracized?
Ostracism. Yeah. I can't read.
I didn't even see what it was. I couldn't find it yet. Hold on. Yeah, ostracism.
Ostracism. There you go. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, as dangerous as the environment has been, the vocal call by Donald Trump to seek a path to peace in Ukraine will make it even more hazardous for anti-imperialist and anti-war forces to demand an end to the war. Trump said, "We must demand the immediate negotiation of a peaceful end to the war in Ukraine, or we will end up in World War III and there will be nothing left of our planet." In the past, that position would have found a home in the Democratic Party, even if it was along the side of more hawkish elements. But in the new Democratic Party, support for the most aggressive policies of a foreign policy community that seems increasingly out of touch with reality is the norm, with no deviation from the line tolerated. And while the most naive would believe that Trump was committed to an anti-war position, there are 3 points to be made here. First, it is a fact that during his administration, the US did not initiate any new conflicts. And secondly, the opportunism and political myopia of the US liberal/left, in align itself with the neoliberalism of the Democratic Party, disarmed itself rhetorically from offering principled criticisms of the obvious turn to the right by the Democratic Party foreign policy establishment that, lastly, represents another example of the political and ideological ground conceded by the liberal/left forces of the Trumpian right that it pretends to be opposed. Wow, that's a long-ass sentence.
That's one sentence? What?
That was
just was like 3 commas?
Yeah.
Jesus. Who taught you about run-ons? Baraka?
Yeah. As a teacher, I have a severe problem with reading that. You get a C for that, sir. Trump's call for negotiations and an end to the war presents a dilemma that is not confined to the contradictory positions of the US liberal/left. Trump is tapping into a sentiment that significant portions of the electorate share, and that is the Ukrainian war has made life even more precarious for them, with higher food and fuel prices on top of inflation that is felt as a pay cut by workers. However, even more importantly, the public is trying to embrace the position that the sacrifices that they're being asked to make for Ukraine and the war effort that they did not vote for does not seem to be shared by the rich. In fact, it appears that the rich, especially the military contractors and energy companies, are benefiting quite well from the conflict and not having to sacrifice much, if at all. Those sentiments are out there. It is being expressed by Democrats, independents, and by increasing numbers of Republicans. And I think he's saying this in terms of the working class.
Yeah,
that cannot be reduced to Trump supporters. Those positions are not being covered by the corporate press, because the corporate/capital press is committed to the class agenda of big capital, and that means the war agenda. The Democrats do not get it, though, even the so-called progressives. The neoliberals reneged on the most progressive agenda Biden pretended he would govern by. In response, progressives have supported every piece of legislation presented to them by the leadership, including uncritical support for aid to Ukraine, even as the capitalist class shifted to the cost of war to the working class contingencies. In May of this year, for example, the growing divergence between Republicans and Democrats on funding for Ukraine was obvious when Congress voted 368 to 57 in the House and 86 to 11 in the Senate to approve an additional $40 billion for the war. Every single no vote, 11 in the Senate and 57 in the House, came from a Republican. All the progressives, AOC, the Squad, Bernie, Ro Khanna, Barbara Lee, and most members of the Congressional Black Caucus all fell in line without one question and not a peep of criticism of war agenda or of its cost. There should be an opportunity for the anti-war and anti-imperialist movement. For the last 5 years, the Black Alliance for Peace has advocated that a major strategy objective for the anti-war and anti-imperialist forces during the bourgeoisie electoral system should be to attempt to place the issue of war and the U.S. imperialist agenda at the center of the national discourse. That never happened. Oh, actually, I thought it was done. Therefore, it is ironic or perhaps contradictory that both Trump and the Democrats have taken up the initiative to insert the issue of war into the national electoral discourse. The Democrats were moving to make continuous support for the war a partisan issue in the upcoming midterm election before Trump made his remarks on Ukraine. The Democrats, though, with full support of the corporate media, were constructing a line that suggested Republican questions or opposition to the position of all-out support for Ukraine reflected the pro-Putin influences of Donald Trump. That totalitarian position has ensured that Democratic Party operatives and elements of the liberal/left either gave a verbal support for the war agenda or cowed into silence. Code Pink reported that as part of its week of action against the war in September, Medea Benjamin, Jody Evans, and retired Colonel Ann Wright went door to door to the offices of members of more than 100 members of the House Congressional Progressive Caucus. What they found was that not one member of the caucus would commit to voting against the $12 billion expenditure for the Ukrainian war that was contained in the continuing resolution legislation that passed on September 30th. Did you know this, Reef?
I mean, like...
What? The effing F? Are you kidding me?
No. Like, not one?
Like...
Not one member of the squad.
Like, fam, tweet this out. Because seriously, when I read this, I mean, it's not surprising given, you know, so now it kind of makes sense, like, into, you know, like Jose Vega, you know, in terms of him confronting Jamal Bowman and AOC.
Someone recently called out Dan Crenshaw, too. Like, so this is happening to Republicans.
Right. I think I saw that today, actually, I think in a tweet. But like, so folks, like, this should give you an idea of what is happening. You know, like, so the idea that Jose Vega, actually should tweet this at him, actually. But the idea that Jose Vega, you know, like, was just random activist, you know, promoting Ukraine. No. Like, there are people who were doing this since September.
Code Pink is doing this.
Right. That, you know, that basically the progressives were like, fuck you, you know? So this should be a telltale, this should be not even a red flag. This should be like the flag to tell people that, you know, like the squad has basically, no, well, I can't even sell out anymore. They basically become the people that they swore that they wouldn't be, you know? So all this to say, so I think especially
where's Rashida Tlaib on this?
Right. So I think especially knowing what Bowman and AOC did to Jose makes it especially heinous, being that was not the first time that they were confronted by this.
Yeah.
You know, so every single progressive, so-called, were basically like, no, we're going to vote for this. You know?
Like, anyway.
Yeah. I mean, there's your laugh track, Crab.
Yeah.
Like he requested a laugh track. There you go. But anyway, I'll finish this and then I'll continue. It will take bold and fearless actions on the part of anti-war and anti-imperialistic forces if we are to win more of the public to take a stance against an agenda that is antagonistic to the interests of most of the public, especially the public that makes up the working class and the oppressed nationalities. So, I mean, I have more to say, but anything that you want to add before? Oh, there's more.
Did you clip this? Like,
Baraka, like, I thought we were done.
I thought we were done. What else you got?
All right. The servants of imperialistic power in the duopoly wants to make support for the white supremacist US, EU, NATO axis of dominion a litmus test in the midterm election. They will frame all opposition to the neoliberal wall agenda as unpatriotic and even foreign expired. The FBI has already been unleashed against the anti-imperialist forces in the Black, African Black communities with the raid on the properties of the African People's Socialist Party,
Yep.
which we reported on.
Yes, we did.
We are preparing our forces for an even more intense struggle. For the Black Alliance for Peace, peace is not the absence of conflict, but rather the achievement by populist struggle and self-defense of a world liberated from the interlocking issues of global conflict, nuclear armament and proliferation, unjust war and subversion through the defeat of global systems of oppression that include colonialism, imperialism, patriarchy, and white supremacy. We do not fight for ideas in people's heads. We fight the structures of oppression. This is the Black radical priest tradition. It is a tradition of struggle informed by historical necessity that we must win. We will not be intimidated into silence by the state, the Democrats, or confused or collaborative leftists. We will continue to struggle for peace, but we understand that there will be no peace without justice, and for justice, we have to fight for it. On that commitment, we say there will be no compromise and no retreat. Okay, now we're done. But
Yay!
At least for that part. So, thoughts before I continue.
Well, I know it's kind of leading into like this, you know, structures of oppression and like colonialism and things like that. Right, which is it's interesting to tie this problem to that problem, you know.
Right.
So I mean, we covered we had Chairman Omali Yeshitela on Tara's podcast a while back. There's probably clips that are out, and you probably can go back and find that whole stream if you want to. He's the chairman of that APSP right there, and the Black Alliance for Peace, which is part of that Uhuru movement, I do believe. If you want to find them on Twitter, they're there. So I think they're doing something in Detroit that might have already happened. St. Louis.
I think it happened already. Yeah.
St. Louis.
St. Louis, I don't think it's happened yet. I know RBN. I feel like Nick, since he lives in.
I think
St.
they
Louis,
planned on going. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think it's happened yet. If
yeah.
That's the case.
But, yeah. I mean, it's also interesting that Donald Trump is playing that card. I mean, I feel like we could have called that. You know,
I mean,
it's an easy opposite to. Yeah.
It's an easy dunk. You know, in terms of.
Well, and he was anti-war the last time compared to like the Democrat war hawk.
Exactly. Like he didn't push for anything. That's the thing. Like, and as Baraka actually said in the article, like he didn't escalate anything as far as war.
Yeah.
You know, but Biden wants to, and by association, the Justice Democrats in office and the Progressive Black and Progressive caucuses are.
Yeah.
You know, even if they're not saying anything, but the fact that they're just basically giving activists the middle finger and being like, we're going to vote for it anyway, you know, like I think, again, like in reading this, it gives the idea of what Jose Vega did, you know, with Bowman and the OC, and even a clearer picture of the idea of like, they really have just gone really to the right. Justice Democrats in terms of how pro-war and war hawkish they have become, even though they may not say anything. And I think even in their silence, they're saying a hell of a lot.
Well, and connecting that to global colonialism, which like, you know, Russia and China are both essentially giving tons of aid to Africa, right? Right now, generally, like from what I've heard. China and Russia, I would like to, you know, I think with like building bridges and shit like that, you know.
Well, you know, I mean, you know, I'm kind of mixed on that issue.
Yes,
so,
I know.
You know, so I think that'd be maybe something I'll do a deep dive in on my channel at some point, but there's a lot that goes into that. Yeah. And I want to kind of do that justice in order to kind of talk about
I mean, they're using it's like economic you know, I mean, what do they call that? It's like vassalization almost, but the economic, you know,
so
which is better than what we're giving them, you know.
But speaking of Africa, you know, my favorite person in the world right now, and Reef's favorite person in the world right now, and I want all of you to have this guy be your favorite person in the world right now, Kwame Ture. And I feel like whenever I listen to his clips, like I hadn't listened to this one until like Monday, and he just warms my soul in a sense of he says stuff so simply but so concise.
Yeah.
I'm not that concise when I speak, but like
and it's
the fact
also
that he's able
entertaining at the same time. Which
entertaining, but he's able to bring a lot of these big issues, and he doesn't speak in that academic language that, a lot of, we know a lot of people, especially in this discourse kind of speak, like for the college educated and whatnot. He speaks very plain, very simply, prophetically, and as you said, kind of entertaining too. But he gave this talk, it's part of a longer talk, in regards, he was talking about Pan-Africanism and socialism, but I want you to hear what he says about socialism and capitalism, because I want to connect it to something that Sabi talked about last week in terms of the Justice Democrats, and that, but I think just the overall picture in terms of ideology in general, or principles in general. So if you want to play it for us, Reef. It's short, it's about 2 minutes.
There's a lot of confusion here on this question of capitalism and socialism. Just recently, a young man said to me, but socialism died. I said, it did? He said, you didn't hear about it? I said, I missed the funeral. Of course, he spoke about the betrayals that occurred in the East. You must not let capitalism confuse your thinking. This is a struggle which Pan-Africanism takes on. We struggle against imperialism in the ideological arena because many people think that capitalism just wants to exploit your labor. It wants to confuse your thinking and make you think just like them. And this is where the real fight occurs. So therefore, this struggle of confusing the thinking, I told the man, I said, you're talking nonsense. Socialism cannot disappear. It cannot die. He said, yes, it can. I said, no. He said, how do you say that? I said, well, you are judging socialism by socialists. You don't do that. He said, I've never heard such nonsense. If you don't judge socialism by socialists, what do you judge it by? I say, you judge it by its principles. Every system is judged by its principles, never its adherence. So he still saw confusion. He said, you're just talking double talk. I said, okay, do you judge Christianity by Christians? So we must not be confused here. Socialism doesn't fall because of betrayal. No system does. The person who betrays themselves goes to the mud, but the system, with its eternal principles, keep marching on. If a system fell because of betrayal, Christianity would have been finished with Judas. At least Judas had the dignity to hang himself. Some of these who betray socialism don't have that dignity. Gorbachev still runs around speaking and picking up 30 pieces of silver everywhere. So socialism is an economic system, and there can only be two in the world, capitalism or socialism, because every economic system must answer one fundamental question: who will own and control the wealth of the country? Who will own and control the means of production? The question can only be answered two ways. Either a few will own or everyone will own. It's as simple as that.
Okay, so basically I want to break down, not break down, but just kind of, highlight what Kwame was saying there in terms of like, you don't judge, he said you don't judge socialism by socialists, people, essentially. You judge it by what it stands for. And he kind of made that connection, and I played this clip before, and Reef knows this quote very well because I say it all the time, regarding mobilization and organization. Mobilization is temporary, organization is permanent and eternal. So if you look at principles, I will use Bernie as an example. Like, Bernie's a man, he's gonna die eventually, We don't, and I think this is a mistake that people make all the time. We associate policies with people, People did not like Bernie necessarily. I mean, people liked him for being him, but people liked him because of his policies. People liked him for what he stood for. Well, what he did stood for. We're not sure where he is now. But, those things are going to live on, and they are living on, because if it wasn't for him, I think in a lot of ways, none of us would be here. We wouldn't be trying to push for a lot of the policies that Bernie helped us to realize as a possibility in America. So just to clarify, Kwame was talking about you judge people based on their principles, not on the personality. Now, I want to play, and this is long, I don't think I'll play all of it, but last week Sabby played, she read what the Justice Democrats, what their principles were. This was written by Cenk Uygur and Kyle Kalinske, you know? So, no, I think it's important because I think people are like, you know, I think it's important to listen to this because what Jose was trying to do, you know, when he called out Jamal Bowman and the AOC over the last couple of weeks, he was trying to keep them accountable. But I feel like more importantly, like if Jose was here, I would have said to him, you know, like, you know, you should have called out the Pacific principles that they essentially, you know, said that they would follow once they got into Congress, you know? And so I am going to play most, if not all of it, but we'll see for time.
Whatever,
you know?
We're good.
But I want you to listen to what Savvy is reading in regards to the principles that the Justice Democrats, you know, were set out to do. And you can tell us in the chat if you feel like they've honored that or not. So go ahead, Reef.
We're going to look at what they were supposed to do. And I actually have a list. You guys know I come with the receipts. We're going to look at the ideology and political issues, what was supposed to happen. And let's make this bigger. Okay, let me go. Look, let's look at this. This is Justice Democrats. This is the piece that's important right here. To accompany its launch, Kalinske and Uygur published the following set of progressive founding principles for the coalition. These are the principles. These are the principles. So let's see what they're supposed to be doing. Creating a new infrastructure program called the Green New Deal. You know what's interesting? That it says a new because it wasn't new. The Green Party had the Green New Deal. You see how they take stuff from the third? Let's just go on. Ending arms sales to countries that it says violate human rights, such as Saudi Arabia, Israel, and Egypt. Say what now? Ending arms sales to countries that it says violate human rights, Saudi Arabia, Israel, and Egypt. So even here, they were letting you know that Israel was violating human rights. But the squad members, with the exception of Rashida Tlaib, and that's because she is Palestinian, the squad members were back in Israel. Take notes. Take notes, guys. This is too crazy to believe. Enacting a federal job guarantee, which would promise all Americans a good paying job, $15 per hour plus benefits. Have they written any type of bills or legislation for the federal jobs guarantee? See, this is supposed to be some stuff that they're supposed to be doing. Ending the death penalty. Ending the practice of unilaterally waging war, except as a last resort to defend U.S. territory. Ending the practice of unilaterally waging war. So when we look at this conflict here with Russia and Ukraine, what was that? With them voting to fund them. Ending the war on drugs in favor of legalization, regulation, taxation of drugs, and pardoning all nonviolent drug offenders and treating all drug addicts. That's interesting. Treating all drug addicts, because even nothing. I ain't gonna get on my TYT spill tonight. Listen to this, guys. Ensuring free speech on college campuses and supporting net neutrality. Now, Ron Paclone was just on here last night talking about the net neutrality legislation that still hasn't even been, what's happening? Ensuring universal education as a right, including free for public college and university education. Again, where is the legislation? What are they doing? And I'm not saying everything is going to be brought to the floor for a vote, but these are the things they're supposed to be doing, you guys. Let's go on. Ensuring universal health care as a right, which is why they should have forced the vote. Establishing paid maternity leave, paid vacation leave, and free childcare. And here it says establishing. They are supposed to be leading this. Expanding anti-discrimination laws to apply to LGBT. We forgot the Q here. People. Expanding background checks on firearms and banning high-capacity magazines and assault weapons. Funding Planned Parenthood and other contraception and abortion services and recognizing reproductive rights. They're supposed to be funding it themselves. Okay. Implementing electoral reform and public financed elections nationwide to make irrelevant and obsolete fundraising from large corporations and the wealthy. And this is why I always come back to what happened to them talking about ending Citizens United. Let's go on. Let's go on. That's why I bring that back, because that's really important. Implementing instant runoff voting nationwide in an effort to make third-party and independent candidates more viable. Highlight the fuck out of that one. You see this? Implementing instant runoff voting nationwide in an effort to make third-party and independent candidates more viable. So when you hear people like Kyle and Jink and all these other people shit on third parties and say they're not viable, make sure you redirect them back to their own rhetoric, which is something that the Justice Democrats was supposed to do. But they point fingers at us. They call us names. All of a sudden they forgot what they fucking wrote. I don't. This was on their project. Ashura, so Kyle gave up. Basically, this is why we're in the position we're in now, because this piece was never implemented. So when people call us nihilists and say we just want to give up or we're being mean, no, you need to go back and look at the project and how it was defined. Mousted said, Sabby holding their feet to the fire. Yeah, I'm sorry. Cryosynth said Kyle found his money, honey. They're both millionaires. Listen, implementing the Buffett rule, ending offshore financial centers, the capital gains and income taxes, and increasing the estate tax, making the minimum wage a living wage and tying it to inflation. Pardoning Edward Snowden. You guys see all this stuff? Passing the Paycheck Fairness Act. Abolishing U.S. immigration and customs enforcement. Abolish ICE. Reforming police by mandating body cameras, establishing community oversight boards, eliminating broken window policing, ending stop and frisk, and appointing special prosecutors to hold police accountable in courts. I'm not even going to touch the policing one because we all know that has not been improved. This is hilarious looking back at this. Renegotiating CAFTA, DR, and NAFTA, and opposing permanent normal trade relations with China and the World Trade Organization. stopping any reductions to Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and establishing single-payer universal health care. Here it is again. Stopping anthropogenic climate change through an ecological revolution and upholding the United States participation in the Paris Climate Agreement. Uncompromisingly rejecting President Trump's immigration proposals, policies, particularly executive order and deportation of illegal immigrants. And you know what's interesting? It says reject Trump's immigration proposal policies, but Joe Biden kept some of those same policies. This is to remind you what they're actually supposed to be doing. And although they signed this pledge, there was no accountability if they didn't do it. And the same people who organized this organization or started this organization want to tell you to be nice to them.
I mean, Biden's done pretty much like, I mean, what? But like those policies he's pretty much still doing, right?
Yeah. I was saying off air that, again, like, Pam, I know you don't do this, but we know people who do, like they'll go to bat for the squad or whatever else, or any politician for that matter. Like, it's very easy to look at Trump and say Trump ain't shit. We know he ain't shit. Like, Trump doesn't have, actually, yes, he does. His principles basically are to make money, however he can. We all know this, but the squad, Justice Democrats, were meant to be different from that. And the fact that, as I was saying off air, that they've done none of this or have gone complete opposite of what they pledged to do, and given what Kwame Ture was saying, in regards to socialism and its tenets, they call themselves, what is it, Democrat Socialists or whatever?
Yeah.
At least they're not socialist. How they're working to seize the power of production, the rights of production to workers. How are they doing that?
Yeah. I mean,
so go ahead, Reef.
Well, it's just like that whole list was like, it felt like Jimmy wrote it. Like, this is all the stuff he still fights for, like, that we're all still fighting for.
Right.
And they're not doing any of. They're either doing the opposite or nothing.
Nothing.
Like, so.
Yeah, it just makes me more pissed now.
Well, because not to interrupt, but like the craziest part was like that Israel, like that they had that in there.
Right.
That all of them supposedly supported that at one time, and now Rashida's the only one taking any flack for that.
Right. And probably Omar as well.
Yeah. And it was ones that committed what was it, war crimes or
right.
So like, and they included Saudi Arabia, Israel, Egypt. I mean, you could add Ukraine, like,
right. Yeah. They're supposed to be anti-war.
Yeah.
They're supposed to be. And they're not calling for that, And I also said off chat, they talked about Snowden, they don't mention about Assange.
Yeah.
Or any journalists who are currently being imprisoned right now. Actually, kind of speaking on that, where's the calls to free press?
Yeah.
That should have been part of that, honestly.
Absolutely.
So, so really, actually, this is very damning for Kyle, and Jake, because they go to bat for the squad all the time, and they say, and others like that are like, oh, I criticize the squad. Yeah, it's tepid at best, but you're not calling for them. You're not calling to say, don't give money to them. Mm-mm. You're not calling to say, we're going to find another progressive candidate since you ain't doing shit right now. Like you failed in your task. You know, we're not hearing any of that from them. You know, because they got to profit off of it still. Even though, you know, it's definitely apparent that they don't connect with the Justice Democrats now that they used to. But all that to say, you know, like, as Collin was saying, judge people by what they stand for or what they claim to stand for. It's one thing to talk about it, it's another thing to be about it.
Mm-hmm.
And given, and again, Savvy found this on their Wikipedia page. It's not hard to find. It's there. I looked it up, you know. But the idea that, like, you know, they were meant to, not to say they were supposed to fight for every single one, you know, but at least for some, you know, like during their time, and now many of them have been in there for now like 2 terms.
Two
now.
terms,
I mean,
and
3.
running on a third, right?
You know, like, and they haven't done any of this
Other than get rich.
other than get rich and write books.
Yep.
And get on magazine covers.
Go on
And
the
people
View.
think, oh, that's good for the movement.
Yeah.
You know? So again, but as I said, just to bring some hope, because I could, you know, like, you know, organization, as Carmine said, is permanent and eternal. The principles do live on. What was listed do live on. It lives on in us. And so I think it's even more apparent now that, and I'm not like every politician now, including the squad, you know, you see them in public, call them out on this shit. You know, call them out on the things that they're supposed to do. Call them out on the things that they campaigned on doing. You have that right to do that, you know? So they have no right to kind of say to us as activists, you know, like, oh, you're rude, or you're being out of line, or we're not nice. At this point, we try being nice, and you flipped us off.
Yeah.
So now we're going to be mean in order to get what we want. And I'll push them, you know, like, where's our wealth? You know, I said this a couple of weeks ago with Corey. She got hers. Where's ours? That's my rant. I'm done.
I'm done. I'm done. Dude,
I'm done.
That Israel thing is wild that that's in there. That they won't do for war crimes. Speaking of war crimes of Israel, name a show that has segues like that, by the way. But this is from friend of the show, Vanessa Beeley. You know, she was just on Tara not that long ago, along with Wyatt Reed. It was a great podcast. If people haven't seen it, you should go check that out. So this is over Israel's secret biological warfare during 1948 ethnic cleansing of Palestine. Poisoning Palestine's water supply in 1948, the Zionist genocidal campaign. So again, Vanessa Beeley, taking a look back at some, you know, war crimes, which she's pretty good at showing off. So this is Prisoners of War in Ramallah in 1948. Benny Morris wrote, "We deciphered the development of the operation and its stages. We found out who authorized, organized, and controlled the operation and how it was carried out in the field. The collection of photographs by his son, Rothenberg," right? Who's the taker of the picture. So Vanessa Beeley goes on to say so that there are 2 articles that have recently been published in Haaretz. Also, there's tons of names in here that I'm going to completely butcher. But as they are both behind a paywall, I will share much of the information here and add some further context. So Vanessa Robin Hooding some good information for us. The first is entitled Israel's Secret Poisoning in 1948. A new article by Benny Morris and Benjamin Kadar indicates that well before the botched assassination attempt 25 years ago on Hamas, Mashal, Israel attempted mass poisoning during the war in 1948. On September 25th, 1997, Mossad operatives from the Special Forces Unit of Kaidan, Hebrew for bayonet, poisoned Khaled Mashal, the chairman of the political bureau of Hamas in Amman, Jordan. One of the operatives held a small tube and sprayed Mashal's ear with this material. So you're getting sprayed on your ear, Collin, with some material. How do you feel?
Right.
So a female doctor, accompanied by Mishka Ben David, one of Mossad's intelligence officers, was chosen for the mission in Jordan. They posed as an Israeli couple on vacation in an Amman hotel. The doctor and Ben David possessed an antidote, which would neutralize the poison if it leaked and injured the operatives by mistake. Israel kept a backup antidote at another location in Amman. The mission was a failure. Mossad operatives carrying forged Canadian passports were arrested, and 4 others found refuge in the Israeli embassy in Jordan. Jordan King's Hussein threatened to storm the embassy and to execute the operatives to placate the king. Israel agreed to release from prison Sheikh Ahmad Yassin, the founder and spiritual leader of Hamas, and to save Mashal's life, the doctor and Ben David gave one of the antidotes to a Jordanian intelligence officer who forwarded it to a Jordanian doctor. Israel saved the life of Mashal. As a result of the botched assassination attempt, Israel was forced to admit that it used poison, a form of biological warfare. Thoughts so far, Collin, on Israel's war crimes?
Water is wet.
Water is wet. Like, I do love the cloak and dagger of all of it in a weird way. You know, it's very like Tom Clancy-esque.
I mean, it's, again, we did not necessarily plan this way, but I just feel like there is a common thread to, well, I guess given what we do, it should be a common thread. But yeah. I think especially tonight, just like these connections with Ukraine, Israel, you know, like just in terms of like, you know, and how capitalism and imperialism,
capitalism,
and wall hawkery that is just kind of rampant. You know, it's just kind of like, yeah, human love solidarity saying all roads lead to Wall Street. Yeah, I mean, not just Wall Street, but like, you know, corporations, big banks, you know, like all of them, you know, like there's that underlying thread here. So, but a matter of the elites, again, playing chicken, you know, with each other at our expense, you know, like, and the idea is like, you know, like if all shit goes awry, they'll be fine. The elites will be fine. You know, even our government, even among, you know, like the people that we like, quote unquote, they'll be all right. But what about us? We don't necessarily have bunkers that we can go to.
No.
You know, like, especially like on January 6th, you know, people are talking about, oh, everyone was in danger. No, you know, like in Congress, they have like secret, like underground tunnels and shit that they can hide into.
Yeah.
You know, like
everywhere.
None of them were that much in danger, honestly.
The walls have Gatling guns in them, I'm sure, if you know, really needed to like deal with something.
So, you know, so it's just, yeah, it's just this whole theme of colonialism, imperialism, capitalism at play, and like the main hitters are causing it, you know, and are at cahoots at each other, you know, supposedly, and the working class gets fucked over.
Well, you know that Geneva Protocol, right? Written in 1925. You don't know that protocol? I mean, it's essentially like rules of war. Right. So they forbid the use of biological weapons. 50 years later, another international agreement was signed, the Convention of the Prohibition of the Development, Production, and Stockpiling of Bacteriological, in quotes, biological, and toxin weapons, and on their destruction, Jesus, commonly referred to as the Biological Weapons Convention. Yeah, that's a much better title. Let's just stick with that. Let's like just not use this gigantic, like, the Convention of the Prohibition of the Development. Like, what? Anyway. However, while 183 states have ratified the treaty, Israel, together with Egypt, Somalia, Eritrea, and Comoros, have refused to join it. Right? So, yeah. So no toxic, but these people are fine with that. Israel and Egypt, Somalia. So like all those war crimes we were talking about earlier. So it is widely assumed and reported that the various poisoning materials used by the Mossad for the already published cases, and few more which have remained secret, were manufactured at the Israel Institute for Biological Research in Nez Ziona, 20 kilometers south of Tel Aviv. Right? So the institute, which jointly belongs to the Prime Minister's Office and the Defense Ministry, was founded in 1952, replacing the Army's Scientific Corps. Its first director was Alexander Keenan. Right? So this unit is now implicated in the use of biological warfare during the Nakba in 1948, the British-assisted Zionist ethnic cleansing of Palestine. Two historians, Benny Morris, professor emeritus at Ben Gurion University in Beersheba, and Professor Emeritus Benjamin Zaiv Kedar of the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, have written Cast Thy Bread, Israel's Biological Warfare During the 1948 War, published by Middle Eastern Studies. According to Hertz, the article was researched and published against the wishes of the Israeli security establishment, which has consistently blocked historical documents that attest to war crimes against Palestinians, including prisoner executions, torture, ethnic cleansing, destruction of villages, and apartheid. The article is based on original documents stored in the Israel State Archive and other related archives. The following is from the abstract of the article by Morris and Kedar. The article describes Israel's bacteriological warfare campaign during the First Arab-Israeli War of 1948. Over the decades following that war, rumors circulated that Israel had used bacteria alongside conventional weaponry in its battle against Palestine's Arabs and the surrounding Arab states. The declassification of files in the Israel's military archives, our discovery of a crucial letter in private hands, and the publication of a handful of memoirs relating to 1948 have enabled us to bridge the divide between rumor and fact. To explain the campaign's origins, to reconstruct its stages beginning in April 1948, to identify who was involved, including Israel's Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion and the Israel's Army's de facto Chief of General Staff Yigael Yadin, as well as leading Israeli scientists and who actively opposed it. So, the code name for the operation was Cast Thy Bread, taken from a verse in the book of Ecclesiastes 11:1. According to the research, scientists from the Scientific Corps, in collaboration with the military units, were involved in a systematic campaign to poison water wells with typhoid bacteria to effectively ethnically cleanse the Palestinian population and to frighten them into abandoning their land. The order to use the typhoid contamination was given or approved by the founder of the Jewish state, David Ben-Gurion. Ben-Gurion consulted with eminent scientists, including Professor David Ernest Bergman, who is considered the originator of the Israeli nuclear program. Also consulted was Professor Efren Katzer and Professor Alex Keenan, already mentioned.
Can you stop for a second?
Yes, sir.
This is eugenics.
Absolutely.
Basically, this is
Yes.
eugenics. And
Straight up.
it just kind of reminds me like what I reported on, because I did talk about eugenics a while back. Like, who wrapped that up? The academic elites. So here you see again, it's the academic elites who have the idea and are essentially pushing the government into following through with their heinous plans. In this case, it's like here is primarily, people of color, but especially Black people, and over in Israel, the Palestinians. So it's the rich and the academic rich, who are meant to be educated, and the progressive ones are the ones that are the most heinous here. So that theme, just as far as like, it's not the working class that we need to worry about, it's the higher ups, especially those in academia who are more sinister in their, in their planning, and they have the means to kind of push government to form legislation around the things that they want.
Yeah. So it's just crazy. Like, have you heard about this before? Like,
no,
at all? Yeah.
Of course not. Of course not.
Right.
Like stuff like this, not like, no wonder this was behind a paywall.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like no one's gonna read this, and I'm sure even if
this is gonna break brains if it gets
like whatever.
Yeah.
Like Warren said, Israel is an apartheid state, very much so.
Worse than just this is eugenic state. I mean, this is like,
right.
I mean, anyway, so the following is taken from the second Haaretz article on April 1st, 1948. So we get a lovely April Fool's joke here. David Ben-Gurion wrote in his journal about the development of science and speeding up its application in warfare. A month and a half later, he wrote about biological materials that were purchased for $2,000. Ben-Gurion was committed to the ethnic cleansing of Palestine to build the Jewish state. Vanessa wants to point out here. So, on July 12th, 1937, Ben-Gurion wrote in his diary explaining the benefits of the compulsory population transfer, which is proposed by the British Peel Commission. So, in that diary, the compulsory transfer of the Palestinian Arabs from the valley of the proposed Jewish state could give us something which we never had, even when we stood on our own during the days of the first and second temples. We are given an opportunity which we never dared to dream of in our wildest imaginings. This is more than a state, government, and sovereignty. This is national consolidation in a free homeland. With compulsory transfer, we would have a vast area for settlement. I support compulsory transfer. I don't see anything immoral in it. So, Vanessa writes, military top brass privy to the operation included Generals Johann Ratner and Yogal Yadin and Lieutenant Colonel Moshe Dayan. It was Dayan's task to deliver the typhoid test tubes to his subordinates with the instructions to distribute it throughout water wells near Jericho and in villages throughout the Jerusalem countryside. It was worth pointing out that the Jordanian army was also deployed in these areas. So the following is from Haaretz. Dayan, now calling himself in code Moshe Neptune, called Yadin, cast thy bread, will be activated by Nashan, meaning Operation Nashan Forces, which included the Harel Brigade, on Monday or Tuesday. I will come down midweek with all the material. Yadin instructed senior IDF commanders, there is an immediate need to appoint in your HQ a special officer for cast thy bread matters. The matter is of utmost importance and must be kept in great secrecy by you. In another cable, Yadin writes, place in the wells material of the cast thy bread type, and another cable is their authorization to use B, the Hebrew letter bet, in the areas that will be evacuated by us, i.e. Israel. Moshe Dayan, addressing the Technion, the Israel's Institute of Technology, Haifa, in 1969, Jewish villages were built in the place of Arab villages. You do not even know the names of these Arab villages, and I do not blame you, because geography books no longer exist. Not only do the books not exist, the Arab villages are not there either. Nahala rose in the place of Malul Kibbutz, Kavat in the place of Jipta, Kibbutz Sarid in the place of Hunifis, and Kafar Yeshuas in the place of Tal al-Shuman. There is not one single place built in this country that did not have a former Arab population. It is worth mentioning that Ilan Papa, the historian and author of The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, has referred to this operation even prior to the recent revelations and was pilloried by the Zionist lobby for his claims. So, would you like to hear Ilan doing that?
Sure.
Okay.
That it imposed on itself. The Israeli troops poisoned the water of Acre, in order to make the city surrender. And the Red Cross reported this to the United Nations. One of the reasons that it got known was that there were still some British doctors working in the hospital in Acre who themselves got the typhus out of this poisoning act. Israel apologized and so on, but and this, by the way, again happened before the 15th of May. It's very interesting. In the 1990s, an Israeli reporter interviewed the two Israeli troops, soldiers, who injected the typhus into the water. I don't know if anybody of you have been in Acre. Acre's water supply comes from an aqueduct, a Roman aqueduct, which is still there. It was the main supply. So the water goes into the old city in the open. So you can easily poison it. And two soldiers, apparently, who felt very bad about it many, many years later, after I wrote it in my book, gave an interview to Yediot Achronot, which is an Israeli daily, and admitted that they were the ones who put the poison. And I think that was, for me, a moment of epiphany, only in the sense that it didn't shock anyone in Israel. I mean, nobody denied it, nobody said anything about it. Said, okay, so you poisoned some people, so what? That also explained to me this sense of commitment that I felt when I wrote my books on 48, and why my colleagues didn't have a similar sense of commitment. Namely, they didn't think there was something terribly wrong with poisoning the water of a city. For me, I don't know how you feel about it, but for me it's a horrific crime. It's a horrible thing to do, even in war. In war, you don't poison people's...
I mean, do you feel like in war you're allowed to poison the water supplies of innocent people? I mean, I know your answer.
I mean, we do that here.
Sure.
In different ways.
Yeah. I hope we don't do that deliberately, like the case is here.
But
which is way worser. Way worser.
No, I mean, this is active poisoning, but again, you could still argue we could do that here. But like, I don't know. Like, is that the end of your article, or?
No, it goes on a little bit.
I wanted to make a point, but I'll talk about it at the end.
Okay. So, local left-leaning commanders at the Southern Front refused to participate in the biological warfare. The article by Morrison Kadar also sheds light on a few more cases in which Israeli soldiers were sent with the poison to Acre, and so not the only place that this was done at. Right? They had more.
Right.
So they were going to poison Acre and the Galilee village of Ilabun. According to British, Arab, and Red Cross documents, dozens of local residents of Acre were poisoned and became severely ill. An unknown number of them died. Unknown number.
Well, why would they care?
Right.
Like, like they get rid of the people they want to get rid of. So who cares? They're not going to track that. They just want them to go.
Yeah. So the operation initially focused on the area between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, and later expanded to Acre in the north and Gaza in the south. The evidence indicates that it later included, either in planning or in effect, other communities such as Jericho, Beersheba, Ilabun, Bedu, Beit Sarik, Beit Mashir, and Hartuv. After the Jews were evacuated, the possibility of adding targets outside of Israel, such as Cairo and Beirut, were also proposed, but nothing came of it. The idea behind that was to hinder the Arab army's advance. Egypt and Jordan, they mean. So, in May 1948, 2 Haganah soldiers posed as Arabs and entered Gaza with the intention of poisoning the water sources. They were arrested and sentenced to death by an Egyptian military court. Morse found dramatic evidence about the operation in the archives of Kibbutz Nan, and testimony provided in 1988 by a kibbutz member. The archaeologist Shamira Gutman was also a Pommel commander and senior IDF intelligence officer. Gutman told of how General Johanna Ratner, the senior commander whom Ben Gurion tagged to head the operation, informed him about sending 2 people to the Egyptian border to do this job concerning wells. The 2 were David Mizrahi and Ezra Horan, Afghan, who set out the mission in Gaza on May 22nd, 1948, were caught and tried in an Egyptian military court for poisoning wells with bacteria and later executed. So, Gutman recounts that he vehemently opposed the operation on moral grounds and also warned that poisoning the water could harm Jews as well. Look, we may also, yes. Look, we may also conquer this area tomorrow and drink from this water, and our army will also be sick with typhus or dysentery, he told Ratner.
Pause right there. Yeah. Like, it's kind of like, this is almost like a cartoon in a sense. Like, you have an idea that will kind of knock out the enemy, but in doing so, that could potentially hurt you too. Like why the idea of putting like a poisonous toxin in the water supply? You know, like, I mean, given like the time, like it was in the 1940s, so I'm sure like, you know, they didn't necessarily have the technology to actually do something like, you know, chemical or whatever else in the way that they can do it now. But, you know, but it's still the idea, like, didn't they think of this? Like,
well, I mean, they probably thought that they could deal with the typhus,
right?
You know, if they needed to, like, you know, clean the water in some way before drinking it. You probably could boil out the typhus until bacterial was dealt with, you know. So yeah, like, I will never give such a thing. Gutman goes on to report that he asked what sort of material were they talking about, liquid or powder, and then he decided it would be a powder. He also notes that the 2 were caught red-handed. Another testimony located by Morris and Kadar was hidden in an interview given by former ambassador Asher Ben Natan to historian Nerman in 2008. Ben Natan described another phase of the operation, an attempt to poison wells in Cairo. In the summer of 1948, Ben Natan was in Paris as part of his position in operational intelligence. Intelligence officer Benjamin Ghibli met him there and gave him a capsule to be used for poisoning wells in Cairo, but the plane was scrapped and said, I was left with the poison capsule, and in the end, I destroyed it in the sewer, Morris said. Sadar was found evidence of this in the IDF archives in a document from September 1948, in which Yadon writes, please call soon in regard to activation of Cast Thy Bread Abroad. So, the document shows that Ben Gurion was at the top of the pyramid. Below him was Yadin, who oversaw the military side of the operation. I should like show people the thing, huh? Who oversaw the military side of the operation. The operation was commanded by Johanna Ratner. Initially, the top man in the field for the group was Dayan, who went on to become the IDF Chief of Staff and Defense Minister. The documents indicate that Dayan served as the smuggler who conveyed the bacteria from the Science Corps to different points throughout the country. David Sheltil, commander of the Estonia Brigade, Etzioni, I guess, brigade in Jerusalem, was also involved in the operation. Intelligence officer Erzna Helmer, later Omer, head of the Haganah General Staff Intelligence Department, also joined at a later stage. The identity of another person who was involved in the operation remains uncertain. In cables, he is referred to as Mizrahi. right? So, yeah, that's the end of it. This is the just another picture of the ethnic cleansing of Palestine women to Jordan in 1948. So this is essentially their like Trail of Tears for the most part. But yeah, thoughts?
God.
Mm-hmm. So,
Apartheid state.
like,
We can't say anything more than that. Like,
I mean,
I don't understand why. Well, I can, but I don't understand why this hasn't been massively reported.
I mean, this was old news.
Right, but the effects of this is not going to be like short term. Like that's still feeling the effects now. Probably not directly like this, but like this is just a part of the the plan in terms of essentially eliminating Palestinians from the Israeli occupation, essentially. And so honestly, and I made this connection, earlier while you were speaking, because I put up a tweet. I actually wanted to kind of talk about this in my rant, but I didn't. I'm not talking about this now. Palestinians are owed reparations, man.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I said in a tweet, in a week that I think is getting a good response, but of course there are going to be some haters in it. I basically said that if you are a socialist, then you should be for Black people getting reparations. And I think most people get the understanding of where I was coming from. I do want to clarify that a little bit more. First of all, I will say, and I said this last week, and I say this again, I am not an expert of reparations. I'm actually hoping that we can put together a stream where we're able to talk about that more with, independent audiences. I'm hoping to get RBN, to collaborate with them to kind of work that out. But, the idea behind reparations, and again, to what Kwame was saying earlier, and I guess and part of the tenets of socialism, if you are a socialist, is the idea of like, who's getting the power? Is it going to be a certain few or everybody? And the argument for Black people, like, people are making the argument in that thread, like, oh, like everybody deserves reparations. I think especially now, like within the working class, true, you can make that argument, but there are certain issues among Black people given our history in the West. I didn't say country, but in the Western hemisphere that have not been dealt with, that need to be addressed, that are very specific to us. So yeah, I'm all for, everybody getting something, as far as being thinking in terms of a socialist, to be like taking power away from, the few, essentially, to have a more of an equitable system. But you can also make the argument that in terms of Black people, if you're white and you've gone through shit, and like I know plenty of you have, like, white people own shit in this country as a race. Black people have the double whammy of being considered a low-class citizen and our race, that we're kind of on the bottom of the totem pole in this country in particular. So our situation is unique, is that we have to deal with both, in order to make something of ourselves. So I say all of that to say that, if you're for people controlling the rights of production, that includes for Black people, because Black people don't own anything here, that it should be more equal. But I think talking about things that are specific to us, that was owed to us, that was promised to us, that we never received. So in that thinking, you can also make the association for Palestinians as well, because right now, I think, especially given their situation is kind of similar, like they're on the low of the totem pole, like in Israel right now. And so given what they've gone through, and this is why I think especially as Black people, we need to be more in solidarity with Palestinians, that we should be making that call, in solidarity with them, as well. So I say that if you are socialist, then you should be for these things. Yes, we obviously want it for everybody, but I think especially in these cases, there are specific issues given history for Black people as well as Palestinians that also need to be addressed, that need to be atoned for. So that's why I meant in that tweet, to unpack that a little bit more. But yeah, I just wanted to clarify that, but I made the connection that, yeah, like they're deserving of that. Not just Palestinians and not even just Black people, like Native Americans too. You can make your case for everybody, but for many people, but the need is there. So, as our friend DJ Joe Nice says, internationalize the struggle, because we're all struggling in a lot of ways the same way. I don't think we talk about it enough just due to media or whatever, especially with a story like this, like this should be talked about a lot more. Like you said, we talk about like the Trail of Tears. This is essentially the Palestinians version of the Trail of Tears. This should be a part of history that should be talked about.
Yep.
And it's not. So
I've never heard anyone in relation to this, to like Israel's apartheid, that they poisoned the water supply of like, like that should be one of your first stories you go to. And gladly Vanessa Beeley, told us this story, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, so really this should, again, like, and we're, and I said this to Reef, all the time, but like, and Indy as well, and given that we're approaching our year anniversary, like, I didn't ask to be on INN News. I didn't, like, Reef asked me to do it, and I gave every excuse not to do it. He coaxed me to do it. I'm glad, he's made me do it, because the things that I've been able to learn in just this 1 year, in terms of obviously talking about the stuff that everybody talks about, but talking about more stories like this that we don't hear about, that we don't talk about, even in independent media, I think has definitely evolved me even more in terms of how I think, in terms of how our world works. But I think also in terms of how I kind of identify myself and kind of thinking about how I want to act in terms of the response I should have in terms to certain things. So again, as I said, I can make the case for Palestinians now, given this story, due to the fact that as a Black person, they did similar shit to us here. This story, again, is nothing more than eugenics Palestinian version.
Yes.
So, and again,
I mean, they learn from the best. So
right. And the fact that Israel, kind of heads our police state. So it's all connected, in terms of all of that. So
to give the viewers insight and stories that I pick, I try to find stuff that would be bigger stories. I do a stream every Sunday night with Indy Left called How Do We Miss That, where we try to cover stories that people haven't covered. I try to cover the stories that people should cover or would have covered. You know what I mean? Right. That should be bigger stories. So, stuff that just pops out on the screen to you. It's like, oh, yeah, that should be the thing. So, yeah, I mean, this was, I had never heard it, and it just really solidifies my thoughts on the way Israel and Mossad and all that stuff works.
Right, but I think, again, going back to the Justice Democrats, they called this,
a long time ago, yes.
They called this stuff, not for this, but I think just overall, just an idea of who Israel really is.
Yeah.
And the fact, again, that it's just like the people that we trusted, that we gave money to, that promised to be better,
aren't.
complicit and are doing the same shit that their corporate colleagues are doing.
Well, I'll remind people that Vanessa Beeley was on Tara Reid's podcast not that long ago. People should go check that out. I think we're trying to get Delilah, third-party candidate for Texas, correct? On with Tara Monday. We just recently had Jose Vega and the people who called out AOC recently.
We had them on Monday.
Keenan Thistlethwaite, I want to say, which is a difficult name to remember. And then Diane Saar, who's part of the LaRouche, she's running as well, third party for New Jersey. New York. Yeah, I'm terrible with that, but God, someone remembers. But Sunday, how did we miss that? I don't know if I'm doing a Reefer After Dark Friday. We'll see. But otherwise, look out for those secret shows that somebody puts up every now and again. So go check out Uncle Warren doing that if you can get access to that club. But anything else I'm missing?
Tara, us. Is that
we'll try to get some guests for next week too.
Yeah, there's possibly an interview that we might do tomorrow. I won't say anything now just in case it doesn't happen, but but as we keep saying, watch out, follow us on Twitter, at Indie News, and you
can find all the links to follow us right there at that Indie News Network, scrolling right across there. And if you look down at the doobly-doo, we've got all the links for all the articles if you want to actually share those or read them. Because they always have like little links to like other articles and stuff that you can click into, and so.
And one thing I think, just as far as the articles that we share, there are generally from independent media sources. So
we try to keep it that way. Most of them, in fact, are found at co-founder of INN, Indie Left News. If you want to go to that website, INDIELEFT.news, you'll probably see a lot of the stories before we cover it. So keep an eye out for those. It's always a great resource that we like to use here. But anything else? Saturdays, I think have Roar Media. Oz is doing some stuff. But yeah, I'll try to find some guests for Friday and see what happens there.
Also, let us know in the comments or on Twitter who you like. Like, we're trying to get more guests, people guests, for the end of the year. So we have a couple possibilities.
Tag the people you want to come on with at Get Indie News. We'll find it.
We'll find it. We've been very lucky with the people that have co-hosted. Okay. So yeah, we definitely want to end the year strong, and like I said, do what we can to make sure we hit our 1,000 mark so we can be a monetized channel. And as I said, we want to grow the network. We want to include more people. We want to include more content. So that the only way we're able to do that is people are watching. So we appreciate you subscribing, appreciate you sharing, appreciate you tweeting us out, appreciate you guys showing us the love. Like, we couldn't have done this all without you, just in a matter of less than a year, as much as we have grown, and as much as we've starting a community that we want to grow and continue to do in this work. So so guys, we really appreciate you. So thank you so much. And looking forward to next week.
Yeah, I think officially our network anniversary is November, right?
Yes,
something like that.
So specific date, but we'll definitely do something special.
Yeah,
to celebrate our year anniversary as a network and a channel at some point. So just watch for us on Twitter, and we'll let you know when that is.
Yep.
Go start Are We an Activist Summit is this weekend. Yes. Yes. Please watch that. Please support our
That's going to be a banger of a thing.
brothers and sisters, in the space. They shout us out a lot. We love them. So please support them. They're trying to do what our government officials aren't doing, and being more active and encouraging people to be more active. So please go over this weekend if you can, and support them and their work and their stream.
And they support mutual aid as we always do. We try to retweet as much mutual aid as possible, so feel free to send it to us. You can tag at Guinea News and put mutual aid in there if you want. We appreciate that as well. And there's plenty already on the Twitter page of that if you want to go in and help who you can help. Show some appreciation to yourselves. So
And other than that,
I think that's it. Yep.
So
All right, fam. As always, labels are bad. Stay independent. Good night,
Good night,
fam.
everyone. Have a good week.